What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. As 2021 wraps up, I just wanted to do some quick hitters in terms of year-end lists or awards essentially for the sport of boxing. I'm going to break this down into 7 short videos. This one is going to be the top 10 pound for pound fighters on my list, and then the other 6 are going to include trainer of the year, upset of the year, knockout of the year, fight of the year, performance of the year, and fighter of the year. And just before we get into the top 10 pound for pound, I wanted to just take a moment, and I'm going to continue to take these moments because I realize that as I've been covering basically a lot of previews and then some recaps, I haven't really taken a moment to just kind of sit back and kind of take inventory of the type of interactivity that a lot of us have had, through some of these videos comment sections. I'm always impressed with a lot of the knowledge, the ideas, the suggestions, the hypothetical matches, just all of the creativity that I've been getting from you guys in the comment section. Really, kind of just emphasizes my feeling going into this channel that no, boxing is far from dead, and it's as compelling as I can recall it being in quite some time. And I feel like a lot of you hardcore fans are kind of the lifeblood in the continued interest in the sport. And so, yeah, I wanted to thank you guys for watching the videos, for commenting on the videos, and, for letting out suggestions. Like somebody said, why don't you put chapters, for instance? So I went ahead and did that. I started including some recaps as well as the previews, but because the schedule and the calendar is so continuous, I haven't really taken a moment to just kind of inhale, exhale, and to thank everybody for this 2021 and for all of the online conversations that we've had about the sport of boxing, or even crossing over into some MMA as well. So big shout out to you guys. And I've had a lot of ideas in terms of what I kind of want the channel to, grow into and become. And I do want to introduce live chats and different things like that. So, one day at a time. But yeah, make no mistake, you guys basically keeping me company in the comments and just having this continued dialogue about different fighters, different weight divisions, different matchups, different title fights, and, even in the history of the sport. Like I did a Roberto Duran kind of a retrospective in terms of where he fits among the 4 kings. So, I dabbled a little bit in the history, but it's mostly been like 80-90% previews or maybe some recaps. So yeah, I'm going to look to double down on what I'm already doing, but also try to include some more just peripheral conversation about the sport of boxing, even outside of the context of previewing a particular fight. So there's a lot to look forward to, and I just wanted to, again, thank each and every one of you guys. So yeah, let's get into the top 10 pound for pound. Should I start with 10 to 1, or let's go 1 through 10? You know what? Let's go 1 through 10, because if I go 10 through 1, you guys are going to know what 1 ends up being based on anybody else who I've had 2 through 10. So Canelo Alvarez at the top. And I'm going to go through this top 10 quickly and then just kind of give my reasoning into why it's laid out the way that it's laid out. Canelo Alvarez at 1. Number 2, Terrence Crawford. Number 3, Errol Spence Jr. Number 4, Josh Taylor. Number 5, Tyson Fury. Number 6, Alexander Usyk. Number 7, Nadia Inoue. Number 8, Vasily Lomachenko. Number 9, Jermell Charlo. And number 10, Artur Beterbiev. So I've got Canelo number 1, and I understand if Contender Boxing Regime, another channel, a channel that I watch, he doesn't put Canelo in his top 10 because a part of his criteria is if you have ever tested positive for any sort of a PED banned substance, you cannot make the top 10. So I respect that choice. And, and people want to say that he's like cherry picking, or he's not fighting the best, or he hasn't fought David Benavidez. I'm like, yo, it's not Canelo's fault that David Benavidez didn't happen to have a belt at the time Canelo stormed the gates at 168. He is the 2-time WBC champ, David Benavidez is, and he lost the title for drug-related reasons, non-PED drug-related reasons the first time, and missed weight the second time. So I'm sure that once Canelo did storm the gates and beat Callum Smith, that he was basically kicking himself saying, oh my God, I can't believe I lost the title right before this money machine is coming to the division. That's not Canelo's fault. If he ends up getting to David Benavidez, great. I hope he fights David Benavidez. But Canelo made his intentions clear. He wanted to come to 168. He declared this as he cleaned up his legal mess with Golden Boy, after beating Sergey Kovalev at 175, came back down to 168. He said, I want to become undisputed in the division, and he did exactly that. And you know what? His most impressive performance out of all of them might have been the one that didn't result in a knockout. I was just as blown away by his Callum Smith performance as I was his Billy Joe Saunders and even his Caleb Plant performances. Not to mention just stopping somebody who's like not a bad fighter. Like people are like Avni Yildirim. Well, Avni Yildirim fought Anthony Durrell like less than 2 years ago pretty damn evenly, to where he headed into the scorecard towards the end of the fight because it was stopped on a cut. It was anybody's guess who was going to win that fight. So, Canelo made Avni Yildirim look like a total amateur who did not belong in the ring with him. But that was just the fight that was sprinkled in between claiming all the belts versus Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant. And I get it. Callum Smith was technically at the end of 2020. But yeah, I'm just looking at the last three performances from Canelo Alvarez, cleaned up the division to where people's imaginations run wild, right? So Canelo's cooking so much right now that, the former 147-pound fighter who then went to 154, 160, who dabbled at 175, 168. What I'm saying is, you're thinking pound for pound. What is more pound for pound than people already saying, damn, I think Canelo's going to beat Artur Beterbiev if they're going to fight. Beterbiev holds two of the belts, WBC and IBF belts at 175. And people are saying, damn, I can't see Dimitri Bivol beating Canelo Alvarez. So they're already projecting that Canelo Alvarez, who, if you were to ask me 5 to 7 years ago, if Canelo Alvarez was going to unify and beat all of the tough guys, or at least all of the belt holders at 168 at the time, it would have been like James DeGale, Carl Froch, something like that. I would have been like, hell no. I mean, you talked about that 154 guy? Well, Canelo did 168, won all the belts, and now we're imagining him fight Makabu at cruiserweight and then potentially, either handling business against David Benavidez or going to 175. And you would maybe have to favor Canelo in a lot of these title bouts against Joe Smith Jr., Dimitri Bivol, Artur Beterbiev. You might favor Canelo in all of those fights. We'll have to see how the odds makers place it, but that says something about where the public and the money, like how they perceive Canelo Alvarez. I cannot deny him that number one spot, especially with the way that he stopped Caleb Plant. And he just, his punching power is just carrying even more immense impact as he's gone up to 168, to where like these guys look like they are just hunted. They look like prey against Canelo as he kind of fainting his way inside. Yeah, Canelo Alvarez is my number one. I had Errol Spence Jr. at number 2, but after Terrence Crawford stops Sean Porter, becoming the first to stop Sean Porter, yeah, this is kind of a what have you done for me lately thing. And it was, if you were to ask me what's the most disappointing event, like the thing that happened in 2021 related to fights, it was Terrence Crawford's cancellation of the Manny Pacquiao fight. I was like, no. That was awful news for fight fans. So yeah, Errol Spence hasn't fought since looking great against Danny Garcia post car accident. So you couple the car accident with, the eye issue that he had, the surgery for. And I still have him hanging around the very top of the pound for pound list, still undefeated. He's the current WBC and IBF champ at welterweight. It looks like they're going to make the Errol Spence versus Ugas fight. That would be for 3 of the 4 titles. Terrence Crawford obviously holds the other. But right now, I've got Terrence Crawford one position up on the pound for pound list, with Errol Spence then being at number 3. Josh Taylor, number 4, just became undisputed, beating Jose Ramirez. He's still undefeated. By the way, I said with Canelo, I was only considering those last 3 fights. No, that would be for, some other distinction that we might get into down the line. But in terms of pound for pound, no, this is not just a 2020. This is just how I see them today, pound for pound. And yes, I would then include his performance over Callum Smith because it was like, about a calendar year ago. So yeah, that is basically the Canelo that we are seeing today. That monster that had Callum Smith on his back foot for like damn near the whole fight. But yeah, Josh Taylor's my number 4. Tyson Fury having, stopped Deontay Wilder again, still undefeated, still, I guess technically the lineal champion as well, coming off 2 consecutive stops against Deontay Wilder. I would love to see Tyson Fury, fight a couple other top 5, top 7 guys in the division, because he's got a very unusual career arc for somebody who's considered one of the greatest. Like, you look at, Muhammad Ali's fight schedule, Joe Frazier's, George Foreman's, Joe Louis, Rocky. I mean, these guys were just, fighting. Whoever was the next up was the next up. And so if Tyson Fury were in a prior era, he wouldn't have just fought Klitschko and then a couple nobodies, and then 3-4 years later, then fighting Deontay Wilder basically twice, and then unknown Otto Wallin. We could look at it in retrospect and be like, oh, he fought Otto Wallin. Well, at the time they scheduled him versus Otto Wallin, nobody gave a damn about Otto Wallin to that degree. So no, that wasn't like a risky fight for Tyson Fury at the time. So, his performance when the lights are the brightest, he's tremendous. He's great. That's why I have him in the top 5. I'm just saying I would love to see him fight a Dillian Whyte, Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua. I would have loved to have seen him fight, Povetkin before he retired. But yeah, Tyson Fury number 5, Alexander Usyk just, did, I won't say the unthinkable, but the improbable in beating Anthony Joshua, outboxing him, outclassing him in the way that he did. He's still undefeated, coming off of becoming undisputed at cruiserweight, having that Chaz Witherspoon, then the Derek Chisora fight, winning them both, and then taking 3 of the 4 titles at heavyweight, beating the much bigger, even though he should have been even bigger than that in terms of the walk-in weight, Anthony Joshua. Alexander Usyk is just looking so money right now. And he's really kind of revived like the sweet science in the way that, people revered Terrence Crawford's skills. They look at, Usyk and Lomachenko with like a reverence that's, above just being a incredibly fast puncher or incredibly hard puncher. Canelo Alvarez obviously is a sweet science guy. He's about as sweet science as they come to. But yeah, Alexander Usyk, number 6. Naoya Inoue, number 7. He just vanquishes people. I'd love to see him fight Nonito Donaire again. He could be even higher on my list if he eventually leaves the bantamweight division and maybe fights like Stephen Fulton at 122 or even Figueroa at 122. We'll see how much he just cleans up the rest of 118 and what he does from there. But performance by performance, he's spectacular and finishing almost all of his fights. And he fought that classic with an aging Nonito Donaire, who's had a career revival himself just a couple years ago. That was my fight of the year for like 2019. Yeah, Naoya Inoue, number 7. Vasily Lomachenko, number 8. 2 spectacular performances. After that disappointing and pretty shocking decision loss to Teofimo Lopez, he rebounds in his early 30s. Hopefully his shoulder issues are behind him, although you can't really rely on that because I'm sure whenever he loses next time, the shoulder's probably going to reemerge as a part of the narrative. But looking at his fights against Nakatani and Richard Comey, how can you deny his top 10 placement when both of those guys were top 10ers and he did that to them? Vasily Lomachenko is the only 135 appearance, and he's not even a belt holder. George Kambosos now has 3 of the 4 belts, arguably 4, depending on where you look at the WBC mess. Nor Devin Haney are on my list, even though George Kambosos is undefeated, had that great performance against Teofimo Lopez. I just need to see the 135 guys fight each other. I mean, we all know the story at 135. Everybody's posturing, everybody's politicking, but George Kambosos did what he had to do. Lomachenko, though, was a title holder coming in. He was the guy who had basically won the belt against, the Luke Campbells at the time, Jorge Linares, Pedraza. I think, long story short is he actually did the multi-fight work to earn the multiple belts that Teofimo Lopez took from him in one fight. So think about it. When you have a unification fight like that, to me, it matters who came in with the 3 belts versus who came in with the 1. Lomachenko did the work to gather the 3 in the same way Anthony Joshua did before getting beaten by Usyk, who then just says, whoop, thank you, collects all 3, right? I get that that's how the game goes, but Lomachenko kind of was grandfathered into this top 10 because he was a top 3-ish pound-for-pound guy for a few years, lost to Teofimo Lopez, and then had the Nakatani and Richard Comey fight. So, the Devin Haney's, he might very well be in the top 10 in a year or 2, depending on what happens, but Lomachenko's already done a lot of the top 10-ish work and is still in there because of his last two performances. So I've got him at number 8. Jermell Charlo was one fight away from becoming undisputed at 154. He needs to handle business because he's just barely hanging on to this top 10 positioning, even though he's beaten, Erickson Lubin via first round knockout, avenged his only loss against Tony Harrison via stoppage. Even though to me he kind of pulled a rabbit out of his hat, he was having difficulty with Tony Harrison in that rematch, let alone the first fight. So there are kind of questions about certain matchups for him and his tendency to kind of lose some of the rounds. He lost a few rounds in my book against Jason Rosario before stopping him, but he just pulls rabbits out of his hat because of his just shocking punching power when he starts letting his hands go and kind of finding the right knockout or at least hurt the opponent opportunities. Yeah, Jermell Charlo stopped Lubin, stopped Harrison, stopped Jason Rosario, fought to a draw versus Brian Castano. So that rematch that they're about to have in February, that's largely going to determine Jermell Charlo's placing in this top 10 pound for pound. And then my number 10, Artur Beterbiev. He just had a really good performance against Marcus Brown, a very game Marcus Brown, who Beterbiev essentially over time broke. Like he broke Gvozdyk a couple years ago to become unified champ, not undisputed, but to collect the WBC in addition to the IBF title that he had been defending for a few fights. So Artur Beterbiev has 2 of the 4 belts now at light heavyweight. He's one of the main targets if Canelo is to go to light heavyweight. He's still undefeated. So yeah, he's rounding out my top 10. Now, I'm just going to go through some of the close calls and kind of just breeze through a few of the divisions, just summing up why some guys you might think should have made it, didn't make it. 122, Stephen Fulton has an argument for the top 10. I can't even argue with that. I didn't have 115's Estrada nor Chocolatito in my top 10. Naoya Inoue's the only 118 guy I had in the top 10. But yeah, 122, Fulton has an argument. He just didn't make my top 10 list. But he just, obviously had that big win over, very disputed, close win over Brandon Figueroa. But yeah, he has an argument. 126, nope. Navarrete would be the closest, Emmanuel Navarrete. We'll see what Gary Russell does against Masiago. But Navarrete would be the closest at 126. 130, Shakur Stevenson's knocking at the door, but no, Valdez is still there as an undefeated champ, and yeah, just more needs to happen to make the top 10. 135, Lomachenko, like I said, is only one at 135 since T.O. dropped out of it. Everyone else needs to fight another top 135er. It sucks for Devin Haney. He seems to be the most avoided in the division. Tank Davis, I believe, has top 10 potential, but yeah, more has to happen. And, Davis's creative matchmaking with let's fight a 140 guy who's barely ranked and isn't really recognized as the division's elite. Let's have him fight. It's just they're doing too much. They need to just start putting him in there with the other guys who the public recognizes as the best in the division. Otherwise, yeah, you're just going to get what you're going to get in one of the greatest talents in the sport. It's unfortunate at this point. At 160, nobody deserves it until they fight each other. It sucks for Demetrius Andrade as he seems the most avoided there. Jermell Charlo should fight Andrade. Triple G creatively found a way to get into a unified bout, but Triple G should have been fighting Andrade or Charlo. It's just stupid at 160. So yeah, I can't really award anybody there. That's one of the more frustrating divisions, and it's 168, Canelo conquered 168 except for Benavidez. So yeah, nobody besides Canelo. We'll see if he ends up fighting Benavidez. And then at 175, I picked Artur Beterbiev over Dimitri Bivol at 175. I like Joe Smith Jr. He's an exciting champ, but nah, not top 10. He lost to Dimitri Bivol a few fights ago. And by the way, I want to see the women's side of the sport continue to grow. I do want to start doing more content on some of those fights and matchups. I see a lot of your comments, highlighting different female fighters. So yeah, I do certainly want that to be more a part of the content that I'm putting out there. Hopefully, some of the big fights are able to be made. It's just tough because sometimes you have like a big name here, big name here, big name here, but you only have like one big name per division. So, you're not going to get a Clarissa Shields versus Katie Taylor, But yeah, let me know what you think about my top 10. Please let me know your top 10 in the comment section. I'd be really curious to see what some of you guys put together on your list. And let me know if I had any like glaring omissions. But yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with this top 10 right here. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the Fight Talk. I'm Woog. Thank you once again for tuning in.